Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free, impartial advice on all your debt.
This is UMAR AHMED for IFL TV in association with MTK Global via Zoom. I'm joined by Adam Smith. I had a quick chat off camera. Yeah, thanks for that. All the things you're saying about the 10-year milestone, etc. Coogan, doing incredible things to keep going till now. And as you said, just to me, off camera, 5 or 6 years without like any profit really, and to keep going, just been an incredible achievement.
Look, the boxing business is wild and wacky at the best of times. It's unpredictable. There's always something happening. And, look, I've known Coogan for a long time. I remember when he was doing a bit of acting. I remember when he was in Ricky Hatton's camp and I got to know him. And, he had this idea of just, literally grabbing a camera and starting to interview people all around the world. And he did it off his own back. I don't know his financial situations at the time, but it must have been very, very tough, to go around the world and do that. But, he's got a great style about him. I think he makes fighters feel comfortable. It makes all of us feel comfortable. And, and I think, he's got you guys on the team now, and it's a terrific success story. It really is. And, like I've been at Sky a long, long time, and we've been in boxing throughout. And when we get our criticism, as we always do, and that's part and parcel of the job. When we say, oh, we can't have this fight or that fight for financial or whatever reasons, we remember that we've been in it, through thick and thin, right from the word go. And before I even started, the early 90s, we were doing Lennox Lewis fights, and so we've been. And American fights. We've been in boxing forever. And, Coogan has, for the last 10 years, done exactly what we did, through the good and the bad times. He stuck with it. And I think, it's fantastic. And you see the array of people that are celebrating his success, your success, from all sides, from very, different parts of the boxing fraternity. And it's great they've come together. And, everybody loves watching his interviews. You're always going to get something. I'm not blowing smoke, but, you do a brilliant job as well, Umar. And I think that, look, it's, I work for a big corporation in Sky, and, sometimes it's difficult doing all these interviews, and, you've obviously got to think very much, carefully. But, it's very good that we sort of work together on that. And I enjoy it. And, I'm always available for an interview with you guys whenever, that. And I think everybody feels the same. They feel very relaxed with you. And, it's you ask good questions. It's the chance for us to speak, honestly, and talk about, the difficulties in boxing, because, you can read the forums, you can read the online stuff, and there's a lot of hate out there, and there's a lot of support as well. As it's very mixed. And then you see people in person, and it's a very different scenario. And I think. I think what Coogan does is he understands the business, and the business is a complicated one. So he knows, and I think that he knows what he can and can't ask, what he can get out. And, and sometimes, when he upsets someone, or, there's a bit of controversy, it's quite sort of fun watching that person come back in pretty quickly, because they know how powerful, iFilm is, and how you want to be on there as well. You want to do the interviews. And, so I think, that's interesting when, Derek gave him a funny one the other day, and he wasn't quite sure how to take it. But, it's, that you guys get a lot of views, and it's important to keep that going. But, yeah, I'm just really proud of him. I think he's done a great job. I think it's, a big success story, for the last few years. Someone literally just picked up a camera and started to interview, and great. And I think it's inspired a lot of others as well. There's a huge amount of, really good people out there now, sort of, going around and doing similar things, and maybe in slightly different ways. But I think he's, he was an innovator as well. And he's, he started a whole, at a time when I suppose social and digital was beginning to really to explode. I think, he got there at the front, and he's run with it. And so, I wish him and you a lot more success. I think it's been a brilliant story.
I'm sure I appreciate that. Thanks for that, Adam. So, yeah, let's talk about what people want to hear. Obviously, on the weekend, we had Usyk-Chisora, where Alexander, for most people, won the fight. If you looked across social media, of course, you and Matt saw it the same. And then we had Dave Coldwell, Eddie Earn, Tony Bellew, etc., all either had it a draw or Derek winning. What did you make of that disparity?
As we always say, Umar, boxing's so subjective. When you're watching a football match, last night I saw the Leeds Leicester game. Leicester score 4 goals, Leeds score 1. It's Leicester get the 3 points. That's the result. It's in black and white. You can argue about VAR. You can argue about whether penalties should be given or not. But that is that's the truth. That's what the result is done. And if there's a knockout in boxing, or a stoppage like Savannah Marshall, I'm sure we'll come back to her brilliant performance. But something like that, it's cut and dry. And however you scored it up to that point is pretty irrelevant. Because that's the finish of the fight. Gervonta Davis knocking out Leo Santa Cruz. But when you've got 12 rounds, people see different things. And as we saw with the Miguel Vasquez-Ritson fight a few weeks ago, we thought Vasquez won wide. Ritson in this corner and one or two others thought it was much closer. And Terry O'Connor put that card in, and there's a lot of debate about that. And he went up again, in front of the board, etc. So it's a lot of subjectivity, isn't it? I mean, Lopez and Loma, I thought Julie Lederman's card on that was way too wide, but it is subjective. And I think, look, Derek was fantastic. I think his effort, his commitment, he said he'd go in there and take the fight, eat leather, take the fight to him and try and drown him for 12 rounds. And that is exactly what he did. I thought there were times where he looked tired. I thought there were times where Usyk maybe could have stepped it up and got him in a bit more trouble. He went back to his corner tired a couple of times, but there were second and third and fourth wins. And you've got to take your hat off to that training team. The whole sort of preparation had been perfect. It was the only tactics he could implement, and he did a very good job of trying to implement them. I think at times in the back end he was too tired to throw the combinations that he probably needed to, but he was still closing down that range. He was taking the fight to Usyk. It was really good. I mean, I thought he won the first round, and I think that Matt scored it the other way, and I wasn't sure about that, but first, second round, maybe you give to Chisora. But I think, pretty quickly, Usyk started to land the quality punches. And I think, it's difficult because, Chisora's applying all the pressure. He's applying it and applying it and applying it. But, it really, in our eyes, should be sort of punches landed that score. And I just feel a lot of Usyk's work sometimes gets unnoticed, and I think that he was spinning well, he was throwing combinations to body and head, and they weren't the hardest shots, but I think genuinely he was outclassing Derek for the majority of the fight. I've got no problem with people seeing it. The judges had it by 5, by 2, by 2. I've got no problem with the sort of margins. Some people had it. I think Spencer had it 9-3. Other people had it, I think I even saw 10-2. I've seen 8-4. I've seen, quite wide margins to Usyk. I've got sort of no issue with any of those. I do think Usyk won the fight, and I thought he won it fairly clearly. But whether you score it by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, whatever, I find it hard push to say that Derek won or it was a draw. I didn't see that, and I watched it back and I still don't see that. Even if you give him, like Tony did, the first 4 rounds and one other, I still can't have Derek winning the fight. But I think he won the hearts of the nation. I think he was absolutely fantastic, and I think it was a moral victory for him to implement those tactics at nearly 37. With 9 defeats on the record, and up against the pound for pound, one of the very, very finest fighters we've had in the last 10 years. All of that. I think more interestingly is what he showed Usyk about heavyweight boxing. So I thought Derek came out a winner. I know he was disappointed, and I know he didn't get the decision. Tony and Dave, look, Dave's trained him. I normally always agree with Dave, or very, very often I don't agree with Dave on the card. I thought he was calling the Selby Cambosis fight when we went over to him absolutely right. But you listen to Mac, you listen to Andy Clark, you listen to the guys, and obviously a lot of people online, who had Usyk winning. I think maybe obviously Dave was hoping beyond hope, and Tony is a very good friend of Derek's. And I don't know, in the cold light of day, when they watch it back, when they think slightly differently, I don't know. They said that part of Usyk's team also felt it was very close, and Eddie counted us at the end, and he was like, and I was quite surprised at that. But there weren't many people in the Wembley Arena. Obviously, there were a lot of shouting for Derek, and a lot of push. And I think everyone was so proud and pleased with what Derek was doing that maybe that possibly swayed a bit. But I've got no problems. If people thought that, you know, Derek won the fight or it was close, then fair enough. What I do know, in my eyes, is that Derek put a monumental effort in. I think he came out of it absolutely, you know, with his career can still go on. I mean, you'd love him to fight Dillian for a third time. You could see him fight Parker. You could see him fight Andy Ruiz. There's all sorts of fights out there. If Derek wants to get back and do it all again, no problem at all. But I think he's been brilliant these last 2 or 3 years for us, Derek. But I do think Alexander Usyk is a special talent. Whether he can win a world heavyweight title is probably a lot of people's big question now, whether he's big enough and hits hard enough to deal with the likes of Fury and Joshua and Wilder, or whether maybe he's more suited to the likes of, you know, your smaller heavyweights, your Andy Ruiz's, your Joe Parkers. You know, you could possibly see him competing a bit better with that. But the guy's undefeated. For me, he won the fight. He showed us his class at times. I think he's wonderful to watch when he's boxing well. He did have questions to answer, and you know, I think he answered them. And I thought his sweet science was good on Saturday night. But I think it was a good fight because Derek made it a good fight. So yeah, I thought it was a really enjoyable 12-rounder. And, you know, we move on. Derek can come again. And Alexander now, we've got the chance of him seeing whether he can win a world heavyweight title. And, you know, a lot of people are saying now, can he? I still think he can.
Okay. Well, yeah, that brings me on to my next question. Obviously, Usyk goes 2 ways here. Either the mandatory with Joshua happens, or if Joshua vacates and fights Fury, then Alexander Usyk will face either Daniel Dubois or Joe Joyce, obviously the winner of that fight, because Daniel's number 2 in the WBO. So how do you think he fares against the big man like Anthony Joshua or Daniel Dubois?
You see, that's the tricky assessment, isn't it? Because Derek's a big guy, but, you know, he's about, you know, strength and endurance and you know, that sort of closing the range. He's not got the fastest hands. And, you know, you look at someone like Dubois and Joshua, who are so much, you know, taller, bigger, their frames, you know, they're super heavyweights. There's a reason why Alexander Usyk won the heavyweight gold medal in London and Anthony Joshua won the super heavyweight. I think, you know, first of all, there's a lot of options and opportunities in heavyweight boxing, as we know. You know, there's a guy called Manuel Charr that holds the WBA regular title that nobody talks about, because obviously we see, you know, AJ is the real WBA champion and he holds 3 belts. Tyson obviously holds that prestigious WBC, so they hold the belts. So, you know, fundamentally, to win the world heavyweight title, you really have to get through at the moment Joshua or Fury, and Joshua defends against Pulev, and Fury, whether it's Kabayel or Takamore, another, will defend on December the 5th. So ultimately, you know, and then the likelihood is that the 2 of them go on for 2 blockbuster fights next year. So it's going to be tied up a bit. Now, whether they aim for the WBA regular, or, as you say, you know, the mandatory, now he's WBO mandatory Usyk, whether they vacate that belt and it's fought between him and the winner of Dubois and Joyce. So that's interesting, because although, you know, Dubois is a much bigger guy, if he gets past Joyce, he's still relatively inexperienced. And, you know, Alexander's got huge amounts of professional experience. So I think that's a really good fight. And let's not count Joe Joyce out of that fight with Dubois, though, because, you know, Dubois will start favourite. Dubois, you know, could knock him out in the first 6 rounds. But Joe Joyce is a tough guy, you know. I know he has been and will be sparring with Anthony Joshua. I think he's done a lot with that. I think, you know, look, he's got a great record. He's got a great amateur pedigree as well, in many ways better than Dubois. So, you know, people will say, oh, he's quite easy to hit, Joe, but he's a strong, tough guy. And if he can withstand Dubois' punishment early, then it will be very, very interesting. I'm really looking forward to that fight. I think it's a fantastic fight for the 28th of November. I'm really glad we don't and agreed not to have a show that weekend, so we can all sit back and watch it in, you know, in the comfort of our homes and join the nation, because it's a fantastic fight. And I'm really pleased that it's being made and we can all watch it. So, yeah, look, let's get that one out of the way first. But how does Usyk fare against those? It's going to be fascinating. I'd still like to see him fight, you know, the likes of Joshua and Fury. Would he start an underdog? Yeah, I think based on Saturday night. But look, he's not lost. You know, he didn't lose on Saturday. He won the fight. He remains undefeated. He remains a hard night's work for anybody. That slick southpaw style, And, you know, he's a bright guy. He's intelligent. He'll study the likes of, it's Joshua. He's mandatory to. So, you know, ultimately, if Joshua and Fury's fight doesn't happen quite yet, then he's got to fight Usyk in the spring. So that'll be really interesting. And Usyk will fancy his chances. And, you know, we've seen AJ lose once. And, you know, we've seen Fury back in the day with John McDermott a couple of times in tight fights. And, you know, you don't know. This is heavyweight boxing. Will he have to go the long way? Yes, it looks like he will. Is he an Evander Holyfield with that power that came up, or a David Haye with that power that came up? No, he's not a thunderous puncher. I think we do know that. But he's certainly got the skill set to give those guys a real run for their money. I'd like to see him, though, if you're actually sort of matching him on paper with the guys you really like. It is, I think, the likes of your Povetkin's, Dillian's, maybe even Dillian's a bit big, but Povetkin, the winner of Povetkin Whyte, something like that, or an Andy Ruiz or a Joseph Parker, those heavyweights that are not sort of, you know, I mean, Dillian's big, but, you know, the others are sort of more your I don't know, your 15, 16 stone rather than your 17, 18s. I think that's what I'd like to see. I think him against someone like Joe Parker, great fight. I think Andy Ruiz, would he beat him? He'd probably have the skill set, but the fast hands of Ruiz, that's an interesting fight. There's a lot out there. Wilder, who knows? You know, who knows what's going to happen with Deontay Wilder after what he's just gone out and said, and, you know, all of that. And also, you know, technically he's just such a sort of strange style that you don't know. I'd like to see Usyk in with these guys, and I think he wants to fight them. And that's great. You know, we remember when we said Holyfield against Bowe. That's ridiculous. That's ludicrous. He came in at 49, Holyfield, to fight Bowe. I mean, he lost that fight, that first one, but what a performance! That 10th round was unbelievable. But then Holyfield was he was a totally different fighter and an unbelievable gladiator, and he had power. And the second time I was there at the second fight with the Fan Man, turned it all around and beat Bowe down the stretch. So, you know, normally the good big guy beats the good little guy, but not always. So, and Usyk has certainly got the boxing ability, the natural talent to be able to compete with these guys. Whether he wins, big question mark.
Okay, Adam, as you referred to there, we've got Whyte Povetkin 2, we've got Dubois Joyce, we've got Fury v at the moment looks like Cabello and Joshua Ppv, all within 4 weeks, so from November the 21st to December the 12th, all in London as well. So everything's going to kind of unfold, and the picture for next year will be much clearer after them 4 weeks.
It is, and it's a great period, isn't it? It's a terrible period for the world. Let's put this into perspective. It's been a horrendous year. And, you know, and a lot of people know a lot of people who've been affected and severely by COVID. So let's not celebrate anything, because it's been dreadful and it still goes on. And we're entering another lockdown this week. Fortunately, elite sport can go on. You know, it's been tough on everybody. So at least we're giving, you know, on Sky and on BT and on all the sporting channels, we're giving the nation, you know, things to watch and things to at least try and cheer them up. And I think that it is an immense, you know, boxing calendar. You know, first of all, is it all going to stay together? You know, we know that, you know, COVID has come in and affected fights, and, you know, there have been positive tests, and there will be more, I'm sure. So what we've got to hope, fingers crossed, is that the big fights on all these bills hold up. You know, that the heavyweight fights on and then in the coming weeks, because as you said, you know, Povetkin Whyte, and then Dubois Joyce, you know, Tyson and AJ. You know, if they can all stay together, then we're going to have a great period, and there'll be some shaking up on it. You know, no one knows definitely who's going to win between Povetkin and Whyte. Yes, obviously, Dubois, that's a slight favourite against Joyce, but that's another pick'em. Then you've got Tyson Fury. You'd expect whoever it is, a Cabello, that he'll come through, and you probably expect AJ to come through against Ppv, although that's a tough fight. And Ppv's only ever lost once. They've met a fight before, you know, and you see what happened to Dillian. You can't look into the Fury, look into, you know, we saw what happened with Joshua, with Ruiz, and all the talk about Wilder all week, and, you know, did he underestimate Ruiz? I don't think he'll make the same mistake again, Josh. I'm sure he won't. But Ppv's tough. Ppv's a hard man. So look, let's see how it all gets through. Let's enjoy the next month. Let's hope they all stay fine, stay safe. We get all those heavyweight fights out, and then I'm sure by December 13th we'll be in a much clearer position of what's going to happen next year. I'm sure there'll be a lot of jostling still. Will Wilder get back into the mix quickly in that Fury situation? Will Joshua and Fury just announce 2 fights? Will Usyk put his oar in? I'm sure there'll still be a lot of a baffling sort of political merry-go-round for a few weeks. But I think the position will be much clearer, and that the Joshua and Fury fight, then we'll know if it can be made. We'll know then if Usyk can fight, Dubois or Joyce, and suddenly it starts to sort of move in the right direction. And I think 2021 could be the year, hopefully is the year where we get crowds back and we get what we need back at boxing. But will certainly be the year when, these big fights can be made. We have to remember that with no gate, so hard to make them. But let's hope that crowds can come back in the spring, the summer, and we do get, Joshua Fury at, at Spurs, at Wembley, whatever, or at a big, outdoor event here with crowds. Otherwise, we're going to have to, take the fight elsewhere. And I said that sort of fight, it must be made here. And, talking about the Dubois and, fighting for world titles or Joyce or whatever. We want those to happen in Britain as much as possible. But we know, there is money in other parts of the world. And when America gets back, I was having an interesting chat with the Americans in the bubble last week, and they were saying that Vegas is running again. It's there's the tables are there, people are going. Of course, it's Americans really, but it's starting to sort of rebuild. So that's interesting, and obviously we have to wait for the crowds. There's big stuff happening. There's a huge election in America tonight. There's a lockdown coming for a number of weeks here. Will that extend? Where will we be in the new year? How long will it be before we get a vaccine? All of those questions. How long will it be really before people can properly travel again? Because, to put something like Fury and AJ, obviously we'd want it here in Britain. But if Vegas came into it, for example, you'd want 20, 30, 40, you want Ricky Hatton numbers to go out and watch it. But obviously, we're not in a position like that at the moment. So, and people are going to be very sceptical when this is all finished. So, it's going to take time. It's not just going to immediately happen that we can get, 60, 70,000 in the stadium again. It could be 20,000. It could be 10. It could be 40. We just don't know the numbers. So, I think while we've got boxing, we should salute all the promoters around the world for getting these big fights on. They've all been dealt the same cards, whether it's Eddie, whether it's Frank, whether it's Bob, whether it's Al, whoever around the world are making these fights. To get the likes of, Lomachenko and Lopez, to get the likes of Ppv and Whyte twice in the space of 3 months, to get the likes of Dubois, Joyce, Pulev and Joshua, all these fights, to have Katie Taylor fighting Bassoon, the women's boxing flying, to have Gervonta Davis, Leo Santa Cruz at the weekend. These are great fights. We weren't getting quite as many of these great fights. So in a way, post-lockdown, it's forced, fighters to take that gamble, to take that risk. I mean, who thought Leo Santa Cruz would be flat on his back after his career? There's some strange things that have happened the upset of Loma, and who knows what's going to happen the next month or two. But what's great is that fighters are getting out again. They're getting money. They're getting, some time in the ring and under the lights, and a lot of them. And I feel sorry, I went through the whole Joe Gallagher thing with Coogan the other day, and I feel sorry for Joe Stable, for example. I want to see Callum Johnson fight. I thought Tasha Jonas beat Terry Harper. I thought it was an amazing performance. I want her back. There's Callum Smith we want to see. I want to see Josh Warrington. It's huge amounts of fighters we want to see. There's only certain amounts of fights on that we can have at the moment on these bills. And, the ones I think that have sort of got in there first have obviously reaped the rewards but have also taken defeats as well, but won't lose anything with defeat. So I think that's a sort of message to everybody out there, certainly at the top level. Take these big fights. If you lose, you can come back. It doesn't matter so much. And, what we do worry about more, especially now with, I know I took my daughter to football last night, and, it might be the last one for a few weeks. She can't play. My son can't play in the next week's team. And, for the kids' sports, it's really going to affect this. Obviously, which leads me to amateur and grassroots boxing, which is really tough for all those out there, and that's where we have to really be careful and be cautious and look into it, and how we can keep that going in a way, and when we come back to it, really get behind it and try and do everything we can to help the grassroots, and make sure the young are still going to boxing clubs and stuff when they can, because that's all difficult with the rules and regulations at the moment. So at elite level, at top level, it's great. Even with no gates, we're putting the big fights on. People are, not getting the money they were. There's a lot of people taking cuts in purses, fighters, and I salute them all. They're the ones getting in there and doing this. And they're the ones that are putting their livelihoods and their careers on the line. And good luck, which is why, going back to Saturday night, Derek's performance was just, absolutely brilliant, because even though he didn't win, he gave it everything. and Usyk took the chance, and they did it for less money in front of no crowd. So hats off to the fighters, and it's long may we continue to get the great matches we're getting.
We've certainly got a few coming up. Adam, let me ask you about the pay-per-view numbers for Saturday night. Any indication? Obviously, it's Tuesday morning we're talking at the moment.
Sure, we won't know for a number of weeks. That's what happens, because there's so many different ways of getting the box office events now. We don't know for a number of weeks. I hope they're decent. I hope they're good. We had a few things on Saturday which probably went against the boxing. That Boris obviously gave a huge sort of speech to the nation, and that was delayed and whatever. So that might have affected. But I'm hoping that Usyk and Chisora are good names, that we're going to have a pretty solid outcome for that. But remember, we've also got Whyte to come, and there's a number of pay-per-views on the other side on BT as well. The Mike Tyson fight. We've got Tyson Fury obviously to be announced, an opponent. So there's a lot of choice out there at the moment. And look, the most important thing is that the customers are getting that choice. That the boxing fans and the casual fans are, while they've got obviously these cold nights at home and a lot of time at home, this is the opportunity to watch a lot of great sport. And we know that these box office events can only be made by putting them on box office. And as I said, with no gate, you've got a huge hole in that. So it's not surprising that there are quite a lot of box office events on everywhere at the moment, in America, in Britain, because, that's the only way of the finances working out. But, we're pleased to be putting some great shows on Sky Sports, a triple world title header with the women next week, led by Katie Taylor. Can't wait for that. Billy Joe Saunders, just speaking to him the other day, is really excited about the fight with Martin Murray. And as you mentioned, or we mentioned earlier, you've got the Dubois-Joyce fight as well, which is on regular BT. So I think everyone's trying really hard to make boxing as accessible as possible, or certainly to give the opportunity to choose it if you want. And we hope that fight fans do, and they get a lot of pleasure out of it. And we're certainly putting a great deal of work into the next 4 or 5 weeks across the board, because operationally, remember, it's really tough as well. We've talked about the lack of our international fights at the moment, but we've got a huge amount of operational difficulties, technical difficulties, working through COVID testing and social distancing and all of the things that we have to around the arenas. And Matchroom have done, Frank Smith's team have done a phenomenal job doing it. And so have the boys and girls at Sky. They've been brilliant. The whole operational, production, logistical teams. It's a real minefield out there, UMAR, at the moment, to try and keep everybody safe. So that's the most important thing. So it's pretty difficult. So we're really pleased that we're giving the option to customers to be able to. And I think it's a fantastic period for boxing. Like on some of our Sky leadership calls, it's like normally you talk about football, talk about Formula One, you talk about the rest of the business. But actually, a lot of people are talking boxing at the moment, and that's always good. That's always really good.
Well, that's what we need. Let's talk a bit more about the heavyweight division. Deontay Wilder is the talking point within boxing right now. So there was 2 main parts to his video, really. Let's start with Mark Breland. He called him disloyal and said that he spiked his water, he believes, and that's why he made his legs weak for the rematch with Fury. What did you make of Wilder's comments on Mark Breland, Adam?
I don't really understand what Deontay Wilder's saying at the moment. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I've been fortunate enough to be pretty close to Deontay over the years. So I'm not going to go and try and stick a knife into him now with what he's saying. I just don't really get it. I don't really get the whole costume. I didn't get the costume thing at the beginning, and the gloves and the this and the Mark Breland thing. It just seems to be a whole sort of array of excuses. And I understand what Dillian's saying. He got knocked out by Povetkin, and he was, bitterly disappointed. And, did he blame his gloves? Did he blame his training camp? Did he blame his trainer? No, he got on with it, and he's dusted himself down and come again. And he's putting his whole career on the line in a couple of weeks. That's a fighting man. That's somebody that really wants to do it the right way. And if he loses, he loses, and people are going to say, oh, if he loses, he shouldn't have gone back in so quickly, and he should have blamed this, he should have changed his trainers. But, listen, he's taking responsibility himself. Is Deontay? I don't know. As I said, I spent a lot of time with Deontay. I really like Deontay Wilder. Whenever I've spoken to him, especially off camera, on camera, he's got that bronze bomber, he's got the sort of the garb and everything, but off camera, he is one of the sweetest guys you'll meet. I'm sure you'll agree. He's very charismatic. He's very caring. He's got a daughter who's got spina bifida. He's absolutely passionate about children, about, you know, how he can help in the world. You know, he's got great hobbies. He loves coming to Britain. He's a real down-to-earth guy. You know, he goes scuba diving. He's got, you know, he's a really cool guy, Deontay. And as I said, I've got a lot of time for him, and I really like him. It's almost as though it's another person. It's almost like this sort of Jekyll and Hyde thing. And I don't quite get it, whether that's what he's had to do to sort of keep the whole bronze bomber image. I don't know. Personally, he lost the fight to Tyson Fury. I like to think of it as it was Tyson Fury's great performance. It was one of the greatest performances by any British boxer away from home, especially in Vegas. It was the performance of the year. You know, let's give Tyson huge credit here, right? Let's not get into costumes and gloves and whatever else. I'm not, you know, that's for the commissions to decide whether the gloves are right. That's for, you know, that's if he wants to wear a huge costume into the ring, that's his prerogative, isn't it? That's his choice. Yeah. We look at what happened in the ring. To me, Tyson Fury dominated that fight. Could Deontay Wilder have knocked him out? Yeah. If he landed, maybe. Could he knock him out in a rematch? Maybe. Tyson Fury won that fight. Let's move on from that. Tyson Fury won that fight. He now, whatever happens, and I don't know whether they didn't want the contract to run out, they wanted the fight on December 19th, and Fury and his team just said, no, look, we're going to move on. I don't know. I don't know what the contracts say. Shelley Finkel told me the fight was going to happen. It's not going to happen. Fury's going to fight elsewhere. Will this end up in court? Will this end up with legal stuff? Will it end up with them working out what to do? Will it end up with Deontay coming back a slightly different route, as maybe some people thought he would anyway? Should he go straight back in against Fury? Should he fight somebody else? Should he fight an Andy Ruiz? Should he, you know, I don't know. Should he fight somebody else and try and sort of, you know, get that confidence back, which I think is probably the right way of doing it, actually, you know, and then, you know, Fury Joshua, and then they collide again. Deontay Wilder is the biggest single puncher that we've seen in heavyweight boxing for many, many years. Right, we've been ringside. We've seen it up close. It's phenomenal, but he's been outboxed, outfought, outclassed by Fury. You know, Luis Ortiz had him in a bag of trouble, but then he silenced him in the rematch. You know, he's got that, and he'll always have that power. A lot of people are saying he'll never fight again. I mean, look, I don't think so. I think he'll fight again. I think he's a proud guy. I think that, you know, he knows boxing is a major part of his life, but he'll have made a lot of money. I'm sure he's got a lot of other ambitions, you know, from where he's from in Alabama. I think that, you know, he's got a lot of things he wants to do in his life. Does he have to fight? No. Will he? I think he will. And I think that he'll come back, and he'll come back ready. And who he comes back with, whether it's, you know, it's J. Diaz or it's not Mark Breland, whoever, that's his decisions. I sort of find this whole thing just a bit unsavory. And I just think, look, you know, why not just, look, if he wants to stay quiet, stay quiet. If he wants to make a noise, try and get Fury in. What's gone on with the contract, I don't know. You know, for me, it will almost be better with Tyson, do your thing. Let's get back in the ring next year and let me try and settle the score or whatever. The excuses, I don't know. But if it's his way of dealing with it, or if it's his team's way, or if it's the image, or it's to cause controversy, I don't know. What I do know is that I message Deontay every now and again, and it's, you know, he's a great guy, and, you know, you take people for what they are, you know, but then people have different, you know, they go in and they say different things in front of camera. But, you know, one of the good things about lockdown that I've found is I've managed to talk to Frank Warren again. I've talked to Tyson Fury. I've talked to the whole range of fighters. We're not just, you know, Anthony Joshua's been out of the ring. Obviously, we get behind him. He's a sky fighter. He's a matchroom fighter. When we pick up the mic, as you know fully well, it's totally unbiased. If Pulev beats him, Pulev knocks him out, he turns boxing on its head again. We call it as we call it. But obviously, Joshua is an ambassador for Sky, and he's been a big part of Sky and Matchroom's journey for a long time. And we'd love to see him go through and fight Tyson Fury, of course. But, you know, he had to deal with the Andy Ruiz thing. This year for me is, when is he going to get back in the ring? When's Tyson Fury going to get back in the ring? And when we get Fury and Joshua together, you know, that's the great fight, and that's the one we can't wait for. We don't know who's going to win that. You know, people have their different opinions. That's great. And for me, I just want to see Deontay Wilder back in a ring. You know, let's cut the nonsense. You know, if it's meant to be controversial, maybe stirring up things when he can't get in the ring, then maybe that's his PR team. Maybe that's the way he's dealing with it, that he can't come to terms with, what happened in that ring. But to me and to everybody else, or pretty much everybody else, it was fairly obvious, wasn't it? Tyson Fury's greatest performance. And let's give Tyson Fury credit for that. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Doesn't mean he necessarily wins the third fight if they have one, because Deontay Wilder's got the power to equalise anybody, and we know that. That's part of his fascination. But we don't really want his fascination to be about the complaints, do we? And about spiking water and all that. I can't take that. Mark Breland's a good guy, isn't he? He's been with him for a long time, and he was also a wonderful fighter himself. And I think that's just doesn't sit well with me.
Frank made a point yesterday. If anyone's going to scream and shout, it's Tyson for that first fight, and in many people's opinion, getting robbed in LA.
I've gone on record, and I'll say it again. I thought Tyson Fury won that fight by probably 3 rounds. I thought he was, as everyone else did, going to be knocked out at the end, and he got up off the floor, which was the miracle of that fight. But that's what people remember that fight for, is how did he get up, and that's why probably a lot of people thought Wilder would knock him out when they fought the second time. But I think what people forgot was how well Tyson Fury boxed that night. So yeah, Tyson Fury should have deserved it the first time. He beat him up the second time. And maybe Deontay should look in the mirror and think, or his team, or whoever's sort of putting him up to this, should look in the mirror and say, but maybe that's just the fact that he's the scary puncher is part of the appeal, isn't it? Maybe the appeal with Deontay Wilder. And the fact that, he's been outboxed, and, listen, Artur Szpilka had, a good 7-8 rounds with him before he got knocked out. There's been others that have showed the way to beat Deontay Wilder, I think. So we know he's never been the greatest in terms of boxing technique. He's been decent. He had a good amateur career. But, in terms of boxing technique, Fury was far too good for him. What we do know with Wilder is he's got the power that excites us, that get us talking, and he's an American, or was an American world heavyweight champion. And after so long with the Klitschko's and Fury and Joshua, they needed someone bad, and they've got this guy who is, this strange fella who's lovely at 1 minute and then chatting his mouth off the next, and saying he said crazy things before. This isn't the first time. He said some really odd things before, which are very close to the bone about what he wants to do to his opponents. So I just don't believe that's what Deontay Wilder's all about. I think it's like, fighters go into a ring and a switch flicks. Definitively, that switch flicks. They have to do that. How can Katie Taylor be the quiet girl out the ring and then be like what she's like in the ring? They are. They majority, 95%, are lovely outside the ring, aren't they? And then they go in and they have to be a very different type of person. But I think with Deontay Wilder, it's almost like he's a different person when he's building up a fight, or he's got something to say, and in the fight, and then when you sort of hang out with him afterwards, or when he's meeting his mates for fish and chips in Sheffield. I mean, it's sort of bizarre, but that's why we love boxing, because there's always something to debate, there's always someone to talk about, and the controversial characters are normally the ones that people want to see fight. So it's as I said, I wish Deontay happy birthday on his birthday. He got a nice message back. He's a nice guy. He's a great guy. He's full of charisma. I love interviewing him. Do I like what I've seen in the last few days? I just think it takes the gloss off, or trying to take the gloss off, the great performance of the year that Tyson Fury showed. And, that disappoints me, because, we should all be, applauding Tyson, including Deontay, to be saying, hey, you beat me, probably should have beaten me the first time. You beat me fair and square. The second time, I'd love a third chance. But then would people think, oh, he's a great guy, we'd love him that? Or people think, nah, you know what, Deontay Wilder's coming out with mad stuff. We really want to see that fight again. Two ways of looking at it.
Okay, Adam Smith, thank you very much for talking to IFL TV. I'm sure. Can
I just say, Umar, I did mention her earlier. I just want to congratulate Savannah Marshall.
Yeah.
I think Hannah Rankin was fantastic in the bubble all week, and it was a fight that was delayed for 2 weeks, and she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. A classical musician. She talked the talk. She was great value for the fight. But I thought the performance from Savannah Marshall. She was a former Sky Scholar. We all went through a lot of ups and downs with her, with confidence-wise. She froze in the Olympics. She really had a lot of issues with her her self-belief, and she won Commonwealth Games gold, and she sort of went through the amateur tournaments, and you didn't know whether she lost the first one, it would be like she'd go back in, put her head in her hands and sort of not emerge out of a room for a while, or she could win the first one and go on and win the tournament. So it was a pretty tricky amateur career. But what we do know is that she was the only fighter ever to have beaten Clarissa Shields. The talent was incredible. And I think since that relationship with Peter Fury started, they have absolutely bonded. And I thought that her performance, the tactics were spot on from Peter. I thought the way she executed it, I thought it was not only the performance of the night, but I think it was one of the performances of the last few months. I really did. I thought Savannah Marshall was absolutely superb, and I'd really love to see her go from strength to strength and fight Clarissa, and and fulfill all that talent that we know for a long time that she's had. And actually, she showed us on the big stage, in front of everybody, on a huge card and under the lights, and she managed to perform. And Hannah was so brave, but what a performance! What a stunning performance from Savannah Marshall. And I think that's anyway. Everybody that I've spoken to said it was the statement of the show. So yeah, I just wanted to say really well done, and it's a great time for women's boxing. I'm doing a Sky working group later, and we've got Terry Harper coming on. Obviously, we've got Terry and Katie and Rachel all fighting next week, and Chantel Cameron just winning a world title. And it's great times. And I think onwards with that, I think that's been a major success after lockdown. So yeah, I just wanted to say well done to Peter and the team. And they've gone through a lot of tough times, and from that debut in Vegas in the Mayweather Promotions night, where she fought early on in the bill, she had her wristband cut, wasn't even allowed to stay for the main event. Some strange times, and I know Hannah's been through a lot, and a lot of the fighters have been through a lot, and your hats go off to all of them. They're great ambassadors, they're great sporting talent, and thankfully they're on the biggest stage now, and it's brilliant.
Okay, Adam.
Really, I think he warms all of us to see that, and there's been some fantastic performances and fantastic like that. Okay, Umar.
Adam, I think you've just froze. I've got you back now. I've got you back there. Just connection for a second, I think.
Okay. I'm back. Did you get all that?
Yeah, we get all that in. Just, I don't know, it's gone a bit funny now. I'll try and close it off here if you can hear me. And I'm sure we'll catch up soon, Adam.
Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free impartial advice on all your debt.